Joining us now, York Centre Member of Parliament Ken Dryden, author of Becoming Canada, Our Story, Our Politics, Our Future. Nice to have you back in the studio.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay, there's the book. The title of the book is Becoming Canada, which suggests that we're not quite Canada yet. So what do you mean by that?
Well, I think we're not the Canada that we can be. And I think that's really what I'm trying to suggest with the title. And I think, in fact, I don't think that we understand ourselves as the Canada that we really are today either. An awful lot of what we have said about ourselves as asides or directly in the last number of years has always related back to the typically Canadian A version of where things don't quite turn out. And I'm not sure that's what Canada is. I know that when I look around, it hasn't been the Canada that I've experienced in my life. And the problem with a phrase like that, as wise as it sounds and as funny as it can be, is that it's also crippling. That when you think you are something, then chances are you're more likely to be it as opposed to something else.
Okay, let's go through it, and we've got a bunch of excerpts that I'm going to read during the course of this, so for those who haven't read it yet, they'll get a better sense of what we're talking about. Here's the first one. You write in the book, I have come to believe, after 6 years as a member of Parliament, that the direction and ambition of Canada's policies and the nature of our politics will not change much, no matter what party is in power, if our understanding of ourselves as a country doesn't change. We are good. A Canada with the right story will make us better. So we've got the wrong story about ourselves?
I think it does relate to that lower sense of expectation and understanding. We're 34 million people now. We're one of the most prosperous nations in the world. I think even more critically, we are a country that is finding a way of living with difference. I mean, what we have called and talked about a lot for a number of years as multiculturalism is really something that other nations are struggling with and we are struggling a lot less with. And that is something quite remarkable. And I think that we need to start to really understand what it is we are, then as a way of then setting different bars for ourselves in order to achieve them.
Well, let's paint the picture. You say this different feeling or different story about Canada is emerging, something that is bigger or more than what we have traditionally thought of ourselves. You talk about multiculturalism. You talk about the way that, unlike other places in the world, we seem to be getting along better than most. Is there more to it than that?
Yeah, I think there is.
What is it?
Well, I think that the U.S. is a multicultural country as well, and so is the U.K. and France and Germany. But I think there's a difference. And I think in part it's that they are larger countries. I think it's that their histories are longer. I think that their sets of understandings are more in concrete than in Canada. A newcomer to those countries will be changed immensely by being an immigrant there, but will not affect very much the direction in which those countries are going. I think that's very different than what our experience has been in Canada. I think that the immigrant to Canada is changed hugely by being here, but also changes us immensely. And that, in fact, what we have become, I argue in the book, is a genuine multiculture. And a multiculture is something that you're actually building together, changing each other in the course of it, and to the point where difference is mattering less. I mean, one of the real vivid experiences for me in my life, I wrote a book on schools by going back to high school for a year and just sitting in class every day trying to figure out what was going on. And one of the things that was going on is kids from more than 60 countries there in that school, how do they relate? Do they relate? And in a lunchroom, it's a disaster. All it is groups. It's the Sri Lankan kids here, and it was the Jamaican kids here, and it was groups, all separate and isolated. In a classroom, you don't have the luxury of that. And so what is going on? And they're often not each other's best friends, but they are, they are less preoccupied by difference. They might even be learning a little bit from difference, but difference ceases to become the big defining thing. That instead of it being an obsession, it's 4 details down the line.
Let's talk about how politics either does or doesn't help that which you are describing right here. And here's the next excerpt of the book I'd like to read. Politics has played, you say, little role in this national reconsideration. In fact, in Canada, politics has gotten in the way. The one party that might have been important to such developments, the Liberals, has been, for many years, out of sync with the times. Talk to us, if you would, about how politics has gotten in the way of this national reconsideration.
I think the politics that we see in Ottawa is it's very much personal politics. I think it's a symptom of having not very much on the table. I think what happens for all of us, and we've probably had the experience of sitting around a table with people who don't necessarily agree one to the other. And so how do you have a conversation that might be a constructive conversation? And the only way that I know of is when there's something on the table that is so compelling that even in spite of themselves, those around the table become drawn to that which is on the table. And just talk about it and talk about it. That becomes their focus of attention. If there isn't something on the table to focus on, you end up focusing on each other. And I think that's what's happened with our politics in this country, is that with not very much on the table to focus on, we just snipe back and forth at each other. And then the media is, part of all of that as well. And in the end, there's just very little discussion, very little debate about any of the subjects that would seem to be the central ones for the future.
Let me try one here about whether we are a conservative country, small or big C. Another quote, Stephen Harper doesn't talk much about the country itself and what we might be. He is distrustful of hopes and dreams. What he despises most are those whose stock and trade are hopes and dreams. Let me suggest the following. You tell me whether you think this is on or off. Most people I talk to say this is not a time in our national history for hopes and dreams. This is a time when we're at best trying not to sink or maybe just treading water. In which case, can you make an argument that Stephen Harper, who's mistrustful of hopes and dreams, with a smaller vision of Canada than what you'd like to see, actually personifies the country better?
Well, what I would say to that is that you always have to be respectful of your own circumstances. And the circumstances now are tougher, harder, that we are treading water to a great degree. And you can't pretend that that's not the case. At the same time, as you are treading water, what is also the task of any of us in our individual lives or of governments is to imagine a moment after one treads water. Mm-hmm. You're treading water for the purpose of what?
Well, getting out of this economic disaster, for one.
To survive in the moment and then to try to make the next moment. Mm-hmm. I mean, oftentimes what gets you through the treading of water is imagining with some excitement about what might happen next. If I can get through this, if we can get through that, then here are the directions in which one might go.
Well, I got to say, you know what? You've been pretty gutsy in saying in your book that there doesn't appear to be any political party in Ottawa right now which is doing a terrific job at articulating what that next grand vision will be after we stop treading water. And here's a quote, again from the book, to speak to that. With the Liberals' recent absence of purpose, a divided vote looks like the Liberals are still conviction-less and disunited. With no obvious new policy direction to define themselves, the Liberals, it seems, are only what they vote, and so every vote, even on small, insignificant issues, is preceded internally by great traumatic debate. When a party is winning, members do as they're told, even if it is not what they want to do. When a party is losing, it is everyone for his or her own lifeboat. Is yours a party at the moment of 77 different lifeboats?
No, but what I'm trying to suggest there is that if you don't have your own message and you're in opposition, all you become is a responder to a government's message. I mean, that essentially day after day, the only message that the media is interested in is the government's message. And the opposition parties become responders to that message. And you don't define yourself by being a responder. You have to define yourself outside of that. Yes, you have a job of being a responder, but But if you don't have a sense of where it is you're going, then your responses just seem to be kind of professionally contrary. I mean, just contrary about everything, as opposed to contrary in the context of this is what we really are, this is the direction in which we would go, and therefore the direction in which they are going, doesn't work, and here's why, and all the rest of it. And that's, I mean, the Liberals have not had a lot of experience in opposition. We have not been very good in opposition in that way. We have felt as if, well, you're in opposition, so you just oppose. And the public is saying, we get kind of tired of just oppositional stuff. Don't help define the other guy. We kind of get him. We really understand him. We don't quite get you yet. So start defining yourselves, and then you might have an audience.
Robert Fowler, the former UN ambassador at that Montreal 150 conference, said he thought he had the Liberals figured out pretty well, because he said, you Liberals will endorse anything and everything that might return you to power, and that was it. Is he right that the Liberals are really that spineless?
He also had even harder things to say about the Conservatives, as you might remember in that conference. No, I don't think that's right. But I think that it's so easy to get into just the contrary mentality. And in part, again, it is that mentality that is rewarded, and your reward comes from, whether you get any space in the newspapers at all. That's where your relevance seems to be defined. And so, the story of the day has to do with the government. The government has their spokespeople. The opposition are there to respond to what the government spokespeople say. And your position in the story depends on whether or not you're particularly abusive, cranky, and potentially a little bit amusing. Then you might get more space. Well, all of that is wonderful for all of the insiders. For the public at home watching all of this, they think it's all just crazy.
Here's the quote. You say in the book, if the give and take of politics is your love, Parliament Hill is your place. If it is not, Parliament Hill is de-energizing and demoralizing, where people imagine the worst, see the worst, and bring out the worst. It is a place that members of Parliament need to get away from as often as they can to rediscover the country, to rediscover why they are doing what they are doing. Do you know if you speak for more than just yourself when you put these views on paper?
Oh, I think I do.
You do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think that the vast majority of people in politics didn't go into politics for the wonderful games of politics. They went into politics because something else was compelling for them. They really thought that they might have something to offer in terms of their own communities or in the broader community.
So what happens when they get there and suddenly they discover that they are pawns on a chessboard, and what actually propelled them to put their name on a ballot seems less and less relevant the more they stay there?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I think you're always hopeful that that isn't the case. I mean, that moment to moment, it may be the games of it, but all of us, step back every so often and say, what are we trying to do here? I mean, our job is to try to understand the nature of the country. What is it we really are? Where are we going? Where can we go? What is it that we can do in order to reflect that as a party? Now, sometimes there's so much noise going on, and a lot of it, that we're generating ourselves, that we end up forgetting that. But we never forget it forever. I mean, we always do go back to it. But again, I mean, even in our discussion today, most of our conversation has been about the politics of it.
There's more to come. Wait till the other three guys get in there. No,
but it does have to, the nature of the country.
I'm interested in it because one of the things you say in the book is that it's really hard for us to have this national conversation about the Canada you imagine, the better Canada that we could become, to pick up on the title. It's hard to have that conversation because our politics and our media are virtually beyond redemption. And as long as that's the case, we're nowhere, right?
But I don't think it's the case, and I don't think any of us have a right to think it's the case, that we are beyond redemption. I mean, if we're beyond redemption, then, you know, then what?
Not us, but our politics. Or our
Well,
media.
you said the politics and the media, you know, in it. And I don't believe that. I mean, I think that I mean, I tried to write this actually just as a speech originally, and then to write it without the politics at all, and say that the vast majority of Canadians aren't interested in politics, they are interested in Canada, they are interested in the world, let's have that conversation. And I realized in doing it that it's a cheat, because part of the way in which we discuss these things, part of the, you know, the venue here in the newspapers elsewhere, you know, does happen through the media, and so and does happen through politics, and that I can very happily pretend that they don't exist, but they do exist. And the challenge is to try to find a way of having conversations and getting the rewards for having conversations from the media and through politics. Because if we don't, I think it's just back and forth. We're too good at sniping. Sniping is too, you know, casually interesting and compelling. And yet, you know, I think for most of us, it's pretty unsatisfying.
Okay, we are not going to snipe here, but we are going to have a few others join us and continue the conversation, as it were.